faculty members, students. It's my pleasure to be here. You know, I have this old academic disease, which is that when I get an opportunity to speak, I have difficulty stopping, as I was telling the economics faculty 10-15 minutes ago. And the difficulty is this, you know, one is the time constraint, the other is the audience, and that's the toughest part, is for me to decide what to speak about. But anyway, so part of this is I'm going to have to speed over some of the things which are there. It turns out that my watch has run out of battery and I don't see another watch here. So I've told my, okay, no, you keep it. So it's going to display. Okay. Okay, so let me start. So the goal which we have as macroeconomists, as the introduction mentioned, I deal with macro issues in NITI. So the basic simple one-line goal is sustained, fast, inclusive growth. And of course, the commensurate social indicators. Now, there's of course a huge amount of stuff behind that single line, but it's a useful line to remember. So how do we do it? You know, so one of the key elements actually, which I've been working on for the last 16 months or so, is the issue of skilling. And there's a nice slogan, I don't know if I invented it or copied it, skill for India, skill for the world. And one of the issues which keeps coming up, you know, in popular press, in discussions, is should it be manufacturing, should it be services, should it be agriculture? I think that question is completely irrelevant for India. You know, we have 1.4 billion people, we have 30 states, and it's going to be different in every state. So that's the thing to remember. I think it's a complete red herring when people have these serious debates about, oh, should it be, it has to be everything. So I was going to focus on the key trends. I'm going to have to actually skip it because of time constraints. And I'll first start with the elements of strategy, which is the second thing there. And in terms of strategy, it's what I call catch-up growth. You know, so we are a lower income country. Then you have a lower middle income country, upper middle income countries, and high. So the frontier is where we want to go, right? That's the high income countries. And the catch-up is going from here to there, okay? So catch-up growth, that is a concept in economic growth theory or the kind of development theory I deal with. And I'm going to give you a little bit of idea about that. And of course, we've long known that this involves human capital skills, technology, physical infrastructure, etc. So, what I'll give you a little bit of idea about is the economic policy and institutions for promoting investment, employment, and growth, and inclusion. That's the inclusive part of that first statement which I mentioned, and empowerment, and to set up a virtuous cycle, you know, where empowerment leads to growth and growth leads to empowerment. Now, I'm going to start with the difference between planning and policy approach. I don't know how much your teaching has evolved, but I believe over most of the country, people still have a planning mindset. And I want to give you a little bit of an idea how we look at the things differently. So what was the old planning? So one of the questions I was asked is, what's the difference between the Planning Commission and NITI? Okay, that's part of that change. What is that change? So in planning, you focus on a growth objective. You do the sectoral. I used to do it. I did it for 20 years. The sectors, and then you tell different parts of the government, the states, that this is what you all have to do. Okay, so it's a top-down approach where government sets out the whole agenda and tells different people to achieve this. Okay? The new approach, I'm going to come to the details. I'm just giving you the overview first, and then I will tell you a little bit about the details. So what is the new approach? The new approach is that we set up a policy and institutional framework in which the private sector does all these things. Of course, there is a broad perspective and which hasn't come out yet, and I can't really talk about it because we have election commissions. I'm constrained to talk about politics, so please don't ask me about politics in this period. In fact, the election commission can have me fired, by the way, if I talk politics. That's the big difference. We are not planning the whole economy in any sense of the word. We are giving a direction, and we are trying to create a policy framework in which the private individuals, private sector achieves that. So what are the elements of this? Now some details. So basically, there are three elements, coming down from that broad approach. One is the market economy, and I call it an Indic market economy to distinguish. Now I'm on that slide there. To distinguish it from the US system and the European system, okay? The US system is too heavily private sector oriented. The European system is somewhere in the middle, and the index system is much more focused on creating competition, completing efficient markets. We don't have markets. This is why we are called underdeveloped, right? We are underdeveloped or less developed. So we have a different environment, and we cater to that. I learned the same economics as they use in US and Europe, but the conditions are different. So our policy approach has to be different. And these are the three elements in which it is different. That's why I just put the name Indic. You can call it whatever you want. The absence of complete and efficient markets, and the information barriers. I'm going to give you a little idea of that, but just the broad thing. So the role of the government and the private sector is very important. That's the new approach. So government has to focus on public good provision, regulation of externalities. These are things which will not happen naturally in a market economy, okay? And especially the Indian market economy. That's the Indic, remember. And then, of course, it is the job of, and create the market environment in terms of pro-competition, pro-investment, because unless the investment happens, there will be no jobs, there won't be growth. Okay? And welfare transfers, which I'll come to, which essence of which is the empowerment. So within this framework, it is the job of the private sector to compete, innovate, and invest. So we do not plan for the private sector, we create the conditions in which they will invest, grow, create jobs. Let me give you a little bit of idea of the reforms which have happened in the last 10 years to promote this framework. Then I'll come to the second and third elements. So one is that factor markets, public sector, and products and services. Now this is very abstract. As was briefly mentioned in the introduction, I was part of the 1990 reforms which were largely carried out from the finance ministry. And what we focused on was the product markets. I hope everybody, all the students are familiar with that, right? Okay, yeah? That is the output, goods market, okay? The output. So you produce whatever, air conditioners, fans, the output goods. So we focused on liberalizing that market. There were constraints on all kinds of things, like aluminium could not be produced by the private sector except the companies which had existed 50 years ago. So liberalizing the product markets and liberalizing the financial system which they use to do investments. Okay, so capital markets, the credit markets, right? So you're liberating the private sector from the product market side and the financial system which goes with it. We deliberately did not touch the factor markets. What are the factor markets? The labor market, the management market, and so on. So they are goods and they are factors. I hope, I don't know if you use the word still in your teaching, okay, yeah. So, so now the focus has been in the last years to systematically go through things which were not liberalized to create this environment, right? If you keep that constrained, the environment will not matter. They will not grow. They will not invest. They will not produce jobs, right? So we've systematically done labor market reforms. There are 4 codes which replace something like 29 different laws. The public sector was not touched because it was thought to be, the huge labor force in the public sector was thought to disfavor reforms, etc. So, and then even in products, things which were missing, the space sector, simple thing like drones, nobody could produce drones, okay? So that has been liberalized. So like that, some elements of the which were left of the product sector, doing the policy reforms of factor markets and initiating the reforms on public sector. So there is a strategic industry policy which defines which parts of the public sector will be privatized, okay? And institutional reform. I don't know how many of you have heard of IBC, the monetary MPC, right? The GST. GST is one of the most interesting reforms because it's the first reform in 75 years of constitutional history which focuses on economics. There have been many constitutional reforms before, but this is the first major reform of the Constitution on economics. Interesting little fact is that the framers of the Constitution, when I look back, were actually very perceptive about the economy. They missed only one thing, this one. So there is a concept called subsidiarity in economics, which is the level which is most closest to the issue should deal with it, right? So when you have public primary schools, primary health center, they should be dealt with at the bottom, right? Where they exist, and so on, up the ladder. So telecom, for example, is all over the country. There's no way you can delegate it. So this concept of subsidiarity means that the job should be located where it's best to do it, okay? The only thing they missed, they thought indirect taxes were local because they are imposed in a local context, but they are not. Actually, it turns out, because what happens when you make indirect taxes state-wise, it fragments the market. This is the concept, only thing they missed. So this is the first modern constitutional reform to integrate the markets. That is the big thing about the GST. It is not the details. The details still require a lot of reform, as I've shown in a paper. Anyway, so abolish outdated laws, decriminalize economic laws, bureaucratic reform, I mentioned, use technology to skirt barriers. This is the practical, if you're going to go out and do a job, you'll also have to focus on the practical issues, okay? So what is this issue? So when you try and reform everything, I'm giving it from a macro perspective. This is not what you're going to be doing in private sector, but the same concept comes in. So what is the issue? When we try to reform the bureaucracy, everybody resists, okay? They don't want to change the ways they do. So what we are trying to do is use technology to leapfrog them, okay? So if you put it into the technology, if everybody can go to the website and file in their forms, regulation, etc., the role of the bureaucracy reduces. Role why reduce? Because we don't want them to obstruct, okay? They can still be positive if they want to be. So you leapfrog, use technology to skirt the barriers. And then social welfare reform and equality of opportunity. I already mentioned public goods, but things like rural-urban differences, etc., is again part of my remit. When I talk about macroeconomics, it's the big issues which don't fall in any departmental or ministerial. Okay, so inclusion and empowerment, you hear a lot about the basic needs. You've heard about food, fuel, water, sanitation, electricity. A lot of work has been done. Empower every section of society. This word empowerment is new. I first used it in a paper. There's an EPW paper in 2002 when I used this word. If I remember correctly, it was empowerment, employment, empowerment, and entitlement. So the concept was move away from entitlement. Of course, some basic needs have to be met, but beyond that, you have empower the people, okay? You have to give them the skills, the opportunity to do whatever they can do. So empower every section of society and the role of the social sector. I'll skip that because of lack of time. So I'll give you a few slides on what the results are, because you hear a lot of, I don't know what else to call it, by the way, I'm very undiplomatic, let me call it nonsense in the paper. So I'm just going to give you three slides of facts. You know, these are personally, I have done the research. These are all based on my own personal research, okay? So first look at the left graph. That is what is called the worker population ratio. So people talk about, oh, there's a lot of unemployment, it's increasing, etc., etc. I do not know where they get the data. And this is the data I see. So what does it show? There are two ways to measure workers. One is by worker, one is by amount of time job which you do. Both of them, you can see, have been rising. This data is a consistent data set called PLFS from 2017-18 onwards, okay? So there's a clear increase in the worker population ratio, which means that the amount of job being generated is higher than the rate of growth of the population. That is what that thing means, okay? So not just is meeting the population, but it is higher than that. That means more people who are not working before can come into the workforce. On the right is a table. Now, it's difficult. We have something which is very important. If you look at the dark part in the lower, because it's easier to see, we have casual workers, regular workers, and self-employed. You know, sometimes people lump all of this together and say wages have been going down, okay? When you break this up into, because they're completely different kettle of fish, if the analogy doesn't work, but anyway. So what has been happening on real wages? This is wages divided by the inflation, okay? Or the inflation is removed. Big surprise. Casual workers' real wages have grown by 4.2% per annum over the same period. It's the highest growth. The second highest is self-employed, 3% per annum. The lowest is regular workers at 0.6%. Slightly bad news for you, but I'll tell you a solution. Because you are probably all going to be, so this is one of the issues which I am working on personally to see what can be done. Your president mentioned that's my job. I have to think about things which others do not. So, I mean, do you see the irony here? A lot of people talk about trickle down. This is actually trickle up. Believe it or not, you and your friends are the richest part of the economy. And your wages are growing a little less slowly than the poorer parts. That is trickle up. That's not trickle down. Okay? Poverty. For a long time, the data was not there. Okay? If you look on the right side, is it there? Yeah, the right side of the table. There's a paper we did, two of BBV, that's Bhalla, Bhasin and Virmani, which was published in the IMF, where we projected, because the data was not there, we used the GDP of the states and the country to project the poverty rate based on the 11-12 survey. Now, the new survey has come. It's 2023. Switch to the left side. The poverty rate we had predicted, look at that 2.0. That is what it shows. Okay? And what we had predicted was 1.8%. And the other one is something else. It's a so there's two there's one absolute poverty level which we have been discussing for the last 50 years. When we talk about the poor, that's what we've been talking about. Okay, that's down to 2% or less now. And a new line which we have now started, we are propagating, is a higher level, which is for upper middle income countries or middle income countries. Even that is down sharply to around 20%. So poverty is going down. That's very clear. Multidimensional poverty. So people said, oh, this poverty is one number. What does it mean? I don't understand. This is all. So they invented a new concept of multidimensional poverty. So all the indicators, I'll speed up now, indicators, you see that red, okay, all the indicators which go into the multidimensional poverty have been declining. That means they are improving, less poverty. Okay, so there are indicators like nutrition, school attendance, cooking fuel, etc., etc. Okay, so let's move now. So now I want to give you a little bit of the flavor of the future. So what is it that, this is all the past. What about the future? Okay. So there are, what I do is I look at the big trends in the economy and the world, and I'm just going to give you a flavor because there's not enough time. So I'll focus on three trends today, which are highlighted in that purple. So one is demographics, India and the world. The second one is digitization, internet, and hybrid systems. I was very happy to hear, talking to your professors, that you have courses in digital education, empowerment, whatever you want to call it. I think that's absolutely necessary for the future. And supply chain monopoly and risk. These are the three big de-risking, it's called. So let me skip quickly to the demographic part of it. So the world share of working age population, right? So if we look at the globe, you see that first line of red and the second line. The first line is the past. The second line shows the changes which we expect in the future, the next 30 years. And the important thing is you look at the high income countries, their share of working population, you can see up to line from 1 to 7, their share of working age population in the world is going down, okay? And will go down further in the future. This is also true if you come to the next level, the upper middle income countries, so-called. China, same thing. It's been going down and will go down very dramatically now. Russia, Thailand, Indonesia, Mexico. Why do I mention the last three? Because you could think of them as potential competitors of India in manufacturing, in the supply chain thing which I was talking about. And then Vietnam, similarly. So India is the only country in which the share of working age population will go up. That's good news for India. Huge opportunities opening up. Okay? That's the good news for all of you. So what does it mean? Okay? So one of the things is the supply chain. I'm going to try to speed up on this. But very broadly, the big opportunity for India is in manufacturing. We missed the manufacturing bus in the last 30 years. Okay? So now what has happened is that manufacturing has got concentrated in one country, the People's Republic of China. And everybody has suddenly woken up that they have a virtual monopoly on tons of goods. I have some tables here, but I won't bore you with them. And so they are looking for opportunities to diversify. So that is one huge opportunity which we are exploiting, we must exploit. And again, one of my jobs is to make sure that we exploit it, because that means jobs for all of you. Okay? And this is some elements of what this shows is that most of this opportunity is in the developed countries for us. Okay? So we have to focus more on the multinational corporations in the developed countries, on FTAs. You heard of free trade agreements, right? So we have to shift our focus on joining these supply chains in the developed countries, because they have what has driven growth. You heard of how Southeast Asia, Korea, even China has advanced. All of them used attracted these multinational corporations and their supply chains to their countries, which drove their growth. So this is our last opportunity to do that. Finally, a little bit on skills. Okay, so I mentioned skill for India and skill for the world. So connectivity, universal access to internet, so and literacy, digital literacy is very, very important. Okay, for the future. There is a whole bunch of services. You know, people think of government or a few services. There are actually 5,000 different skill categories. You know, in the new education policy, there is for the first time, there is an emphasis on skilling, okay, job skilling. First, let me tell you what the difficulty is. I have I have hired people who have online degrees in business and business administration. I have spent 6 months trying to train them to do a job. Job skills are what's going to move you. The education is the background, that's the base. That gives you an opportunity to learn certain types of job skills. But you have to learn those job skills if you want to progress. And you have to keep learning them if you want your wages to keep rising. This is the problem. Okay, that's the preliminary analysis of mine why the salaried wages are not growing. We are not focusing enough. So remember, this is just the base. Good, you need the base because that opens up certain types of jobs to you. But that's it. After that, the people who will progress are the ones who get those job skills. Okay? Global opportunity. So one of the big things which is going to come, you remember what I said about demographics, it's all linked. I haven't said this. You remember that the working age population in developed countries is declining, but there's another new factor. This is where the trends come in. This is my job, to look at big trends and connect them. There is an anti-immigration sentiment. Okay? Earlier, when their number of people available for jobs was going down, they would get immigrants. But people are revolting against it. So what's going to happen? How are they going to? How is the economy going to function? Okay? There are certain goods which can be imported, and they're doing most of that. But now the skills will have to be unbundled. That means certain parts of skills can be done in other places, okay, like India. Okay, you'll have to unbundle it. So to give you an example, you think of government. I was in OECD about 9 months ago, and they were saying they don't have enough people, they are not able to recruit people for government jobs. Imagine how different it is from India. Here we get thousands of applications. So what do? Okay, what you'll have to do is separate out those parts which can be done online, and then use whatever people you have for the physical part, okay, where the physical interaction is necessary. Okay, all the jobs, all service jobs in the West are going to be unbundled. In the last 3 years, the fastest growing service export in the world is e-services. That's what I'm talking about. Okay? And fortunately, India's share in these e-services is rising. Okay? That's the huge opportunity. I already talked about digital empowerment, but just briefly, I have some time. The way, of course, I told you there's a micro perspective, your personal, but the way I look at it, we have a problem of, education is the responsibility of the state. This is according to our Constitution and Supreme Court judgments. You have all these primary health centers, primary schools, secondary schools all over the rural areas. But the quality is pathetic. Okay? 50% of people at the end of primary school cannot read. Can you imagine? You got your primary certificate, but you cannot read. Okay? So the way I see digital and hybrid system is to raise the quality of the education and health services we can provide, for example, in rural areas. Okay? So this empowerment, how to use this to empower people. But on your side, you better have those skills, because that's where some of the jobs will be. You must get those digital, must feel comfortable. I'm going to skip all this. This was some future and end. Surprisingly, because of this watch, I'm almost on time. A lot of time for questions. The conclusion, based on the reforms done and proposed in the last 10 years, we expect to project to become a third largest country in the next few years, and an upper middle income country. These are my projections, by the way, and this is where the ECI comes in. Please do not attribute these to the to the Niti Aayog. These are my personal projections. Okay, I'm an expert. I'm free to do what I want, but I'm not representing the government during these 2 months at least of election time. So GDP growth of 6.5% is possible in the average in the next 25 years. This will make us an upper middle in my calculation. These are not, many people would disagree, but I just want to lay it on the table for you just to intrigue you. And of course, there are many reforms which need to be done, which is what I work on also. And the social indicators, I said, will be commensurate. So one of the things I do, I'll just show you the graph. Oh, it's going up. You know, one of the things I do is to do cross-country comparisons like this. So these are countries, and I've taken every health indicators. Here it is life expectancy, okay, just for your interest. And we put all the countries for which this health indicator is available. Those are the green dots there, okay? And then we put a regression line through it. On the x-axis, there is GDP per capita, okay? So we can see the point at which the country becomes an upper middle income country and a high income country, and see what is the life expectancy average at that time. So that gives us a target, okay, that we must achieve at least that. This graph also shows that we are a little behind. That first red dot there is below the line. So we are not performing so well, okay? So it gives you a way of thinking about these social indicators. And of course, I go behind this and find, as you would not be surprised, that this problem is mainly due to life expectancy of females. The male life expectancy is actually above the line, okay? The female one is below. So things like that, right? So that's another thing. It tells you what to focus on. What are the social things to focus on, how to think about it. Okay. So as I'm on time, I was going to end with that. I'm going to end with it. But women's employment issues, skilling of women, many of these things are also on the table. Green India, I just mentioned it, which are there. And then I hope I open it up for questions. And please feel free to ask anything, obviously in the beginning connected with what I said, but after that, any other questions. And don't feel shy. You know, one of the things I tell people, sometimes people feel that, oh, my question is silly. That's not important. Please believe me, in education, the only way you learn is by asking honest questions. Obviously, it's not a game here, right? So if you have a doubt, you have to ask, okay? You have a question, you have to ask. Okay? Thank you.